Hi, it's me, Shakti Sundari, and I just wanted to introduce you to my next heart-to-heart Uncut interview, which is with the Social Experimentalist, Danny Shine. We filmed the interview at the One World Festival in Glastonbury, Somerset, in 2017, and the interview cuts out after half an hour because of the equipment that we were using, so it does come to quite an abrupt end, but I hope you really enjoy the conversation as much as I did.
So hi, it's me, Shakti Sundari, and I'm back with my second heart-to-heart Uncut interview, which is totally off the cuff and spontaneous. I'm at the One World Festival in Somerset, and Danny Shine, who's right here, has just interviewed me for his YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Has it got a name? What's it called?
Social Experimentalist.
Oh, Social Experimentalist. And then I said, well, let me interview you back. So that's what we're doing. So yeah, I didn't actually know that it was called that. What does that mean, Social Experimentalist?
I don't know exactly what it means because I made it up, but I suppose that sometimes I approach life as an ongoing social experiment. And sometimes I think that's what's going on here. That we are just in this kind of ongoing social experiment where we're in this kind of game, which is an experiment in the sense of it's not an experiment like you're trying to get this result out of. It's a kind of playful. Let's see what happens if we do this. That's what a lot of what I do is like that. I don't know what's going to happen.
So there's no particular underlying purpose. Like you're not trying to achieve something by this experimentation.
Not really,
no.
Although. Well, perhaps it's more of a case of the underlying purpose may reveal itself sometimes or one day as I go along. So one of the teachers at the moment who I'm quite influenced by is a man called Tom Campbell.
Yeah.
And I speak and he is a scientist. Started off as a physicist, and then when he was fairly young, he stumbled across someone who taught him about meditation, and then he spent 40 years exploring meditation in a scientific way. And he explains that he explains that this is a virtual reality that we're living in. It's digital virtual reality, and that we're in this kind of it's like a simulation game. Right. It's a metaphor for what this is. It's not exactly that, but it's a simulation. We're in this simulation, and according to him, the simulation is about moving towards love. So reducing chaos, reducing, I think, entropy, and becoming more loving.
Chaos. I was going to ask you something now, but now you said chaos, I'm like, surely. Does that? Why no chaos? Why eliminating chaos?
I don't know. I don't know. It's not that chaos is a bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't think he means it in a negative way, but.
No, because it's just as a woman, I suppose, and as who I am and what I do, I see chaos as like very much a part of creation.
Right.
So like life being this spiral of creation that kind of goes down and like breaks down and becomes chaotic, but then out of that breakdown and chaos something new emerges, which is a little bit of the social experiment in a way. These cycles of growth and contraction and breakdown and birth and all of that. I don't know, but that's me going off on one, so I'll come back to you.
Social Experimentalist is about viewing life as an ongoing series of social experiments in which I'm not trying to get to a particular place. I'm experimenting and playing around, like a kid in a lab with lots of different chemicals, saying, "Oh, I wonder what happened if you put that in that."
So give us an example of the kinds of things that you do as your social experiments. Yeah.
I stand and I'll stand up in Tesco and read a spiritual book or a book or a poem.
What, out loud?
Yeah. Whilst people are queuing, or I'll stand in a supermarket and question and point out what they're up to there, which is basically, tricking people and trying to get them to buy all sorts of things that are no good for them. So I might do that and see what happens. Or
Is this what you do with your megaphone, or
sometimes with the megaphone, sometimes without. Or I will go into a bank with a group of people and sit down and meditate in the middle of a bank and see what they do.
Where have you done that?
I've done that in Barclays.
What happened?
Well, at first they told us we couldn't do it, obviously, and then we just said, no, we're just sitting here meditating. I put some music on and we just sat there for a few minutes, and someone was filming from outside.
What happened when you read spiritual books in Tesco's?
Well, obviously they said we couldn't do that. We had to get permission and all that kind of thing.
Right.
So, and that's often they call the police. The police are involved in a lot of these things because they don't know what to do when something outside of their normal frame of reference happens.
Exactly. So, are you modelling yourself on someone? Like, did you see someone doing this once when you were younger and think, oh, that's really brilliant, I want to do that. I want to be a bit of a rebel, but it's a bit of an iconoclast. Is that the right word? I want to do that. Are you copying someone? Is this just Danny, like, who's just doing his thing?
Yeah. No, I'm not copying someone. I just fell into it.
How did you fall into speaking through megaphones in Tesco's?
Well, many years ago, someone suggested that I go to Speaker's Corner, and so I started speaking then. Which is, I'm just telling you, it's for anybody watching. I've never really said this before, but one of the most common phobias and fears people have is the fear of public speaking.
Right.
Yeah. And Speaker's Corner is an amazing place to learn to get over that, because you're never going to see most of the people again, right? Whatever you say, someone is going to give you a hard time,
right.
Which is good. You will welcome that, right? So I learned to speak in public there, and I loved it. It was really interesting. And then I sort of thought to myself, well, why am I doing this like on a Sunday in a little corner in town if our society is so into freedom of speech and expression?
So can I just hang on a second? So, like, when you were doing that, did you go there with like, oh, I've got this thing I'm really passionate about. I really want to talk about this topic, or was it just anything? It
was just anything.
Anything.
I mean, I went with a sign that said, "Don't believe anyone, including me," because everything at Speaker's Corner is everyone trying to, get everyone to think like them, trying to persuade them to be religious, whatever it was, left wing, right wing.
Yeah.
So I went there with that sign, and I started speaking, and it affected people in different ways. And I did workshops there. I kind of did workshops there with people, with the crowd.
How did it affect people? What sort of response did you get?
Well, sometimes people were really moved. They would send me emails and say they're really moved by it, because I was speaking about existential things. I was, who we are, where are we, what are we doing here, do we even exist? So that kind of thing. And then I moved it to town, and then I bumped into someone who had a megaphone on him, and he was at a protest, and he was speaking to the police. And there's actually footage of YouTube when I first met him, and I just fell in love. I borrowed it, and I thought, oh, this is amazing! Like, it's just so much fun. So then I just started going around with making films with him for a few months, just going to different public places using a megaphone, and what happened was just astonishing. That was my first kind of experimentation in public places with society.
Right.
And then it developed, and then I would go into supermarkets.
How do you find? I've got so many questions. Like, how do you find the courage to do that? Because for most people, that would be such a massive, including me. Like, I'll speak for myself. There's some things I could do, and I wouldn't feel embarrassed or shamed or scared at all. But that would be overcoming a huge hurdle of belief that I shouldn't do it, I couldn't do it, everyone's going to look at me, I'm going to blush. Do you have any of those feelings, or is there something in you that's a bit immune to those sort of social conventions?
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not free of that. Unfortunately, that is such a huge part of our conditioning, And it's interesting because I'm always suspicious of anything that most people think, anything most people do. Yeah, but we were all brought up that for various reasons. Obviously, it's easy to control people if you get them to all do the same thing.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely not completely free of that. but when I'm doing what I do,
Yeah.
I really don't care, and it's like I've learned through it to realise that if someone comes up to me and gets angry or calls me a wanker, they're just revealing themselves.
Absolutely.
It's their stuff. Yeah, so I don't take it on board
Right,
at all.
that was another question, because actually we were just talking earlier on, and you actually said to me that you're a sensitive person. And so I was thinking, well, he must get all kinds of people saying all kinds of things to him, probably some quite horrible things.
Yeah.
So you don't feel that?
I don't feel it.
No.
I feel it much more at home. My children particularly know how to, really press the right buttons. But on the streets, I don't feel it at all. And it's a good training for me. It's good training to just remind myself that, whatever people have their experience, it's also such an important and wonderful and liberating idea that I'm responsible for my feelings and they're responsible for their feelings, and nobody makes me upset.
Yes.
Nobody causes me to be angry.
Yes.
They only trigger it.
Yeah.
And then from the moment it's triggered, if I then choose, subconsciously or consciously, am I going to run with that or not?
Yeah.
And so it's a really good reminder and training. And I also get I get a buzz out of it. It's a
Okay.
fantastic buzz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have also, though, like, as far as I know, sort of been in situations like you said, you mentioned the police. So
Yeah.
when you go and do these things, you're always possibly going to be arrested or charged with something or moved on, right?
Yeah.
So is that not a fear for you or a barrier to you, or?
I mean, we've been very heavily conditioned to be frightened of the police. The whole legal system is designed as a form of intimidation, again, I've learnt techniques which I recommend and also use in other parts of my life, which is to, if a policeman comes up to me and I remember in time, which I more often than not don't, I will meditate or count to 30
Yeah.
to create a break between, because what's happened when a policeman comes up to me, and this is happening in all our lives all the time, right?
Yeah.
Basically, he's going to be feeling frightened because he or she doesn't know what's going on. There's a guy with a megaphone, or someone's complaining, someone's called up the police, someone's in Tesco speaking out loud. He comes in, he's gonna be frightened deep down, not even necessarily aware of it, and he's going to be projecting that
Right.
in what he does, and so what I've learned to do is to cut off from that energy by meditating
Okay.
for 30 seconds or a minute, and then usually I'm able to deal with it much better. And sometimes they go away. They literally go away.
That's amazing.
It's not often, but certainly in my life when I count to 30 or 60, and I would recommend this to anybody watching this,
Yeah.
if you're in a situation where you feel any sense of defensiveness at all,
Yeah.
count to 30 or 60, and you'll often find that the person will either go away or will stop what they're doing. Because when people ask you questions, that's another thing I've learned about questions.
Yeah.
Questions are loaded to the hilt with assumptions and feelings,
Yeah.
and often they're not even questions.
Yeah.
They're just a way of people pretending that they're asking questions, but what they're really doing is telling you what they really think
Exactly.
and feel.
Yeah.
And I find if I cut off from that for 30 seconds to a minute with my kids, with my wife, with anybody, they might go away because what they're trying to do is energetically hook you in or project that pain onto you so that they don't have to feel it. And if I'm not careful, I'll just get right in and I'm pushing that pain back.
God, yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. You're teaching me something here. Well, you reminded me of something. It's so good. So, gosh, oh man, so many questions coming out of that. So how have you cultivated this awareness? You talked about meditation. So besides doing the social experimentation, have you been meditating for long? And what do you do?
I'm not really the best example, to be honest with you. I find disciplined. I struggle with discipline. I really struggle with discipline, and I struggle with giving myself a hard time about that. So yes, I do meditate quite often, sort of, for a few minutes here and there.
Yeah.
And I go to all sorts of things like this gathering where there's meditation.
Yeah.
But I don't do a lot of it, and I haven't got a strong practice of it. I'm sure it would be hugely beneficial if I did. But I've done lots of these types of things. I've done lots of, self-development. Although I remember a wonderful guru called Ram Su, who, when they asked him how he reached enlightenment, he said he was an alcoholic for 19 years. So, he recommended if anybody else wants to reach enlightenment, they should also do the same. And he once said that the only thing you get from going to self-development courses is a developed self.
That's brilliant. Oh my God. So again, my mind's just going crazy with more questions. So I want to know, what's the most sort of dangerous situation you've been in? Have you been in prison? Have you been in court? What's the worst you've got yourself into so far with all of this?
I have been prosecuted at least five times. So I've been to court probably about 20 times, because and that was an education which I got, which was I feel like when I remember, I'm a hugely lucky person, fortunate, maybe, I don't know, lucky, fortunate, blessed, and because I've never been convicted.
Oh, right.
So the education, the legal training that I've got is absolutely priceless. Nobody in the legal, there's not one person who works in the legal world that has got the training I have, being on the receiving end, and the deep understanding about how the legal system works from the point of view of someone on the receiving end, and I haven't been convicted.
So what have you been charged with then?
I've been charged twice with breaking railway bylaws. So one of them was for molesting or interfering with the comfort of passengers on the railway.
I didn't know that existed. Molesting. Goodness.
Yeah.
Well, that was through the megaphone thing.
No, that was just wearing a balaclava, and I had a sign saying "Don't panic," right? And also using the megaphone. They use that one against me as well. Yeah. And also they've got another thing, using amplified sound with, to the annoyance of anybody.
Crikey.
Yeah.
And so.
And hold on a second.
Yeah.
I've been charged with. I've been charged with possession of cannabis. They found a tiny little bit of cannabis on me. I've been charged with racially aggravated public order.
Racially?
Yeah.
Well, what? What did...
Some guy lied about what I'd said.
Oh.
Right. I personally, by the way, I think the idea that there is such a thing as the Public Order Act, and that you can get, I've learned again about this, about the criminality of the system. The system is the criminal, and the people that run it are the criminals, according to my simple definition of crime, which is the initiation of violence against somebody. Yeah. So they've got these laws. They're really rules. They're not laws, but they've got these laws that if you say something to someone and they're likely to get alarmed, harassed, or distressed, you've broken the law. How can that be? I'm not responsible for other people's feelings.
And is this
right?
how you defend yourself in court, or do you do you play the system?
No, I kind of half play the system. There's a whole movement out there of people called free man on the land that use various strange methods that don't seem to work. Yeah.
Right.
I kind of half play the system and half don't play the system. So, for example, when they ask me, am I, the first thing they do in court is that you go for the first hearing. They make you come back and back because they make more money. It's a business. The court is a business.
How do they get money from that?
Well, because every time you go back into court, the whole system is operating. So they're not getting, it's not direct money. Oh, you're in. It's business. So if I go to court, there's got to be a clerk there and a judge there, and the court's open, and all the people. Yeah. So they really milk it every time. Every person that gets charged has to go to court on average unless oh, by the way, unless they admit that they're guilty, which half the time they
Everyone does just to...
well,
Yeah.
then they have to go 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times to court. Yeah. So the first time you go to court, it's to plead, which is an interesting use of language. Yeah. Right.
Yes.
Pleading. What am I pleading? Right. So for example, in the case of the cannabis, they ask me, am I guilty or am I not? Do I plead guilty or not guilty? And I say to them, I would say, I can't remember exactly what I said, but I would say something like, if I was to ask you if you were guilty or not guilty, sir, of wearing a tie, what would you say?
So how do they respond if you speak to them like that? Because that's just so out of the bounds of the normal way of operating,
well,
isn't it?
they often get angry.
Right.
They'll ask me again. They'll ignore it. They'll ask me again. Look, do you plead guilty
do you
or not
have
guilty?
To plead?
Yeah.
Like, do you
No.
have? No. Right.
I would say, and then I would say, well, what do you mean by guilt? Where's the guilt involved with having a plant in my pocket?
Wow.
So
you
talking
really
about guilt
are like
for?
questioning it right to that end level then.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
But they would just railroad that, and they would say, well, right, we're going to put you down as not guilty.
Okay.
Right.
So that it just doesn't fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'd have to come
Oh,
back,
God.
but eventually they drop the cases because they're all stupid. They're, I'm not a criminal. I do not initiate violence.
Do you ever meet anybody in the system who gets what you're doing, who sees who understands what you're about?
That's a great question. There's a lovely saying, and I don't know exactly how it goes, but it's something like, it's really difficult for a man to understand something if his wages or his living relies on him misunderstanding it.
Right. That's a really good one.
So
Yeah.
if you work in the system, it's really difficult, because once you get what I'm saying, the whole
It
thing
undoes
falls
everything,
apart.
doesn't it? Yeah. There's no point to it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think there are some people, and there are certainly commentators on the YouTube films that clearly understand, but it's hard to get. It's hard to do that in the system.
Right.
And I think there are some people in the system, maybe some defence lawyers who kind of get it, but not a lot. Because they've been trained to think a certain way.
Absolutely.
In their training.
So I'm just going to kind of, just a few more minutes, is that all right?
Yeah.
Just want to flash back, because I'm just curious about what made Danny shine. Is that your real name?
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool name. What made Danny Shine have this whole amazing attitude of questioning everything? Have you always been like this from young, or something happens? It's how did you get to be like this?
It's a good question. I'm not really sure.
I mean, you must have been a right pain in the neck.
I was definitely a right pain in the neck. When I was 10, I was sent to boarding school. That's the only thing my parents could think of doing, and I was from they were at the boarding school. A lot of the people there were from families where parents had split up or situations like that, but I was sent there because I just could not handle me at home.
So you were already questioning everything.
Yeah, but I wasn't consciously questioning it in this way. I did it in a way as a kid. I didn't really know exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
I don't remember a lot of it, and I just remember that I was just really difficult as a child for them to deal with.
Yeah.
I think probably, funnily enough, I think lots of things contribute to these things. Lots of things in our childhood.
Yeah.
I think, for example, being brought up in the Orthodox Jewish tradition,
Right.
and having spent 3 years studying Talmud,
Okay.
which
What is Talmud?
Talmud is it's the written down oral tradition that sort of accompanies the written law, which is the Bible.
Okay.
So it's like thousands of pages of the ramblings of the ancient rabbis. Yeah,
Is it a good read?
I wouldn't call it a good read. I mean, when I look at it now, there are thousands of people who are really into it and studying it and feel like it's the greatest religious thing that you can do, and they get an ecstatic pleasure from going in and out. But it's
Right.
well, I look at it now and I see it as a really strange, almost obsessive compulsive kind of, you know, delving into crazy little details of law. It's not just law. There's lots of stories and myths in it as well, but there's also a lot of crazy intricate laws, and there's loads of questioning in it. That's the thing. There's loads of questioning in it, and it's a lot about language. There's a lot about language and learning language and words. And my dad, who's like obsessive about language and words, who's actually a lawyer.
Is he?
He's a lawyer, yeah. He's not anymore, but he was a practicing lawyer. Although I never really got involved with his practice or anything. I didn't really know much about it. But he's very pedantic about words. If we don't get our words right, he picks us up on it still to this day. You know, if we.
So what does your dad think about
So
this?
if I say things like to my dad, if I say, "Oh, that's very true," he said, "There's no such thing as very true. Either it's true or it's not true."
Yeah.
What does my dad think about this?
Yeah.
I think he finds it very challenging. I don't think he really wants to know too much about it.
You ever
He may
like?
secretly kind of like some of it, maybe. Yeah.
I was going to say, have you ever used any of your dad's mates to get you off in court?
I've discussed some of the things with him. He does find it quite funny when I get, you know, the court things happen, because they're so ridiculous when I get prosecuted, and you know, he does find it quite amusing.
So does your, you know, you mentioned you was brought up in this quite Orthodox Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
Is that still an important part of your life now?
Well, it's part of my life because it's my wife's choice and a lot of people around me, and so I kind of there are aspects of it that I think are pretty good. Although, so for example, they every Saturday they don't use money, they don't buy anything, they don't use technology. And that's quite a good practice, so we end up spending it, you know, Saturdays kind of family time. So that's quite a good practice. Then there's kosher food, which they're quite heavy on, but I'm vegan, so I'm kind of vegan is kind of, in my opinion, a very high level of kosher, because
Beyond
most
kosher.
which is one of the things that I'd like to try and one of the ideas I had about creating a new type of kosher that is, you know, based on no animals involved, treating people nicely, treating the earth well. I think there needs to be a new kind of standard or new aspiration that things, you know, that we can have like a new type, might be called kosher, might be called something else, where, you know, what we consume is fit for consumption.
Right.
And I would say that, you know, from my point of view, much of the food we eat is not fit for consumption. I personally now, although I'm a very, very recent convert to veganism, I don't think that animal products are fit for human consumption.
You're not wearing a t-shirt today, but you did have another one. What's this one say? That one's, oh yeah, no matter how much you jog, you will still die. But you had another one the other day, which, what does it say?
It said, not your, well, I've had a few, but one of them said, not your mum, not your milk. That's one of them I've had. Picture of a cow.
Yeah.
And also the ex-serial killer.
That's it,
Ex-serial killer, meat eater in brackets.
Do you get these t-shirts made up specially?
I do, yeah.
Do you just have like one-offs made?
Yeah.
That's really impressive that you do that.
That's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And to catch up with Danny Shine, head over to his YouTube channel, Social Experimentalist. Satnam and much love.